controversial. I have no idea what it's about and I don't really care. I'm ready. For September, I started out a new reading challenge for the year. I am going to try to get my physical TBR, so the books that I physically own on my shelf, down to 30 books or less before the end of the year next year. If I read one of my physical books every week until next August, which is August 2023, in theory, my TBR should be down to 30 books if I'm not purchasing books is the key. And I have already purchased books in September and totally screwed this up. So come join me for this wild roller coaster that is going to be the next 12 months. So let's go over what that means. I need to read one of my physical books or unhaul one of my physical books for every week for the next 12 months. I did it this month and I think I succeeded. I'm a little bit ahead, but also behind. So you'll see why in a second here. But that does not include books that are limited edition. So I can buy books that are going to disappear. They're, you know, I get one chance to get them. I'm gonna allow for me to buy them, but it does up that number and make it harder for me to get to 30 books. Other things like continuing series and whatnot, I'm going to aim to finish as many series as I can, at least catch up on them. And if I finish the series but there's still a book I don't own, I'm gonna aim to read that book if I purchase it in this 12 months as soon as I get it. Does that make sense? Instead of purchasing the book just to complete the series on my shelf, I'm going to purchase the book and read it immediately. That out of the way, that is my reading challenge. So let's talk a little bit more about the books that I read in September. It was an interesting month. So just buckle up real quick here. The first book that I finished here is Night of the Soul Stealer, which is the Last Apprentice third book in the series. This is children's horror. I talk about this a lot in my August wrap up and my August vlog. So if you're interested in this book, please just go watch that video or read my review on Instagram or Goodreads, because I enjoyed this, but there are many disclaimers that need to come with this book. It is problematic, to say the least. I still enjoyed the spooky vibes and atmosphere. I just had a lot of issues with this. The next book I read, I do not have physically anymore. I had to return it to the library, but that was Chainsaw Man Volume 1. There is a ton of hype for the anime coming out, so I wanted to read the manga, just the first volume, to see how I would feel about it, since I was actually intrigued. Not an anime fan here, but I do like manga occasionally, and there are very few anime that I enjoy, and this one seemed like one that I would end up liking. I did not like it. I gave this book, I believe, 1.5 stars, maybe 2, if I was feeling generous. It was not it. The vibes are there. The vibes are there. The concept of a man turning into a chainsaw demon, phenomenal. The character's motivations and his personality, absolute flaming garbage. I do not recommend. The sexism is off the charts in that book. I will still give the anime a try, just to see if maybe when they adapted it, they gave the character more personality and shifted the motivations in the anime a little bit, but I am not very hopeful, so that was very disappointing. The next book that I read physically was from my physical TBR, Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen. I got this book back in August. It came out around my birthday, and something was telling me that I would enjoy this book. I saw a bunch of reviews. A lot of my friends were reading this and giving it really good ratings. Sarah's one of them. I talked about it again in my August vlog, since that's when I started this book, but I did not finish it until September. But this book is dark romance. It's kind of a Cinderella retelling and also a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I saw this review on Goodreads that explained it as Beauty and the Beast, except both of the love interests are the Beast. So I think that's accurate. I really loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I think I rounded down to 4 because I don't think it will be for everyone, but it was for me. It was for me. I read it in like one day, which is rare for someone with a toddler. I loved this. The main character is super unlikable for some people, I think, but I found her really relatable. She comes from a good place, but she comes off wrong, and I think that is how I come off to people a lot. And the way that she thought was very in line with some of the ways that I think, and I just could really see myself in this character. You know, she's not super pretty, but she's pretty in her own way, and she frowns a lot, and I have resting face, so this was highly relatable. Such a wild ride, such an adventure. It is part of a series, apparently. This first book wraps up really well, so I was happy about that. I was worried about halfway through that we would end up on a cliffhanger and the story wouldn't be complete, and that was gonna really upset me. But this ended up being a lot better towards the end than I expected the end to be. So the vibes are immaculate, the characters are great. This is enemies to lovers, but not really enemies. They're more like frenemies who bicker. And by the end, the romance is not even like gushy romance like it generally is in YA. It was more realistic in my opinion. I loved it. They love to hate each other. I loved to watch them hate each other. I recommend this. Next, I read an additional book that didn't count towards my challenge. This is The Aquanaut by Dan Santat, sorry. I thought this was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It didn't offend me. I didn't dislike it, but I also didn't love it at all. So right smack dab in the middle. Just a very mediocre read. It was very cute. I really appreciated the relationship between the girl and her uncle. It was very sweet, and I like this happy portrayal of extended family taking care of a child who is orphaned. I really liked that. I thought that representation was nice. It was good. It was fun. I don't regret reading it. I thought it was enjoyable. The next book I read was on my physical TBR, but I also hauled it in August. Again, a recent haul. I talk about this a lot again in my August vlog. I was just trying to catch up on my reads this month, as you can see. But this is Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shea Earnshaw. I am obsessed with The Nightmare Before Christmas. As a child, that movie meant a lot to me, like a lot to me. It got me through some things, and that movie is just like a warm hug to me, and the world and everything is just my soul. It's my identity at this point. But this book is following the events directly after the movie is over, and it's following Sally as she becomes the Pumpkin Queen. Spoiler alert, she ends up marrying Jack at the end of The Nightmare Before Christmas. So in Long Live the Pumpkin Queen, you're going to get Sally's story, and it is absolutely her story. Shea Earnshaw did an amazing job with this. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. The only reason it didn't get 5 stars is I felt like it was really short and I would have liked more time, and I think that's kind of a me problem, just being in love with it. So that's kind of a compliment to Shea Earnshaw, but I loved this. The atmosphere is on par with the movie. The characters are perfect. The story is fun. I read this in, again, about 1 to 2 days because I was obsessed. So I read this physically. I also listened to the audiobook. Do not recommend the audiobook. The voice was very whispery and airy, kind of like the character in the movie, but to a fault. It was kind of hard to hear. And additionally, all of the characters had Sally's voice. I didn't like that. I think there should have been a full cast for the audiobook, or at least a male-female or masculine-feminine voice comparison, because Jack sounded really weird in here because, again, in the audiobook, it was narrated by somebody who was talking airy and wispy like Sally does. Anyway, audiobook, not great in my personal opinion. This book, absolutely excellent. The vibes, the Halloween vibes, they're here. I just watched the movie again because it's so good. I read physically 2 books from my physical TBR, but there are 4 weeks in September, so I needed 2 more. I started these 2, but I did not finish either of them. So instead I unhauled some books to make up for that. I am unhauling Red Rising and These Witches Don't Burn, which I talked about in depth a little bit more in my August video. This one, problematic. It does not represent paganism, Wiccanism, and witches appropriately, as one myself. This is an own voices review, you could say. And the main character is an asshole in her head, so was not a fan of this. She's very judgy, very gatekeeping, and I couldn't get through the first few chapters because of that. So, gonna unhaul this. That's one book. And then Red Rising. I did not read this. I did not even try to read this. I have watched extensive reviews of this book, including spoilery reviews once I was pretty sure I didn't want to read it, and I definitely don't want to read this. The whole purpose of this book does not work for me. The motivation of the character, the way the plot moves, it is just not for me, and I am not gonna unfairly read this book and give it a bad rating because I know I'm not gonna like it. So I'm just gonna unhaul it. No hard feelings. It's over. Somebody will be really happy to get that book. I'm also gonna unhaul a third book, which is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I know this is shocking, a little bit controversial, but I tried reading this book a few years back. I bought this a long time ago, but I tried reading it and I DNF'd it after a few chapters because it was too violent. There is, the first few chapters, there is child abuse from a father to a child, and it was just too much for me. I didn't love the writing a lot. I don't love this young adult flowery dresses and deep descriptions of like fairy tale atmosphere in like a regal setting. The merchant life, I don't know, it just wasn't for me. I just wasn't in love with it, and I don't know why, and that's okay. I loved The Night Circus, which I thought this would be comparable to. I don't know, something didn't click with me about this, and I think that's okay. I think we're gonna be fine without this. There are plenty of other books in the world that I will enjoy for sure. I don't think I will give this a good rating, so I'm not even going to hurt its rating because I know it's not for me. Does that make sense? That is the unhaul. So we have knocked off 3 books from the TBR by unhaul and 2 by reading them. Next month I will hopefully get through these 2. Lastly, I would like to do my book haul. I hauled a huge stack of books here, so let's just rapid fire these. This was one of the books I hauled. I read the hardback. It was a library used edition. It was trashed. So when I saw this at my used library store for just like 50 cents, I got it. It's the paperback version, but it's in a lot better condition than the one I have, and I have the whole series. So I'm gonna unhaul the library edition that was kind of trashed and maybe just recycle it and transfer my notes to this one to keep forever on my shelf. The next book I hauled, 2 of them, they are from a friend in Canada, so that was super exciting. They were getting rid of their books, so I purchased for a low price 2 of them. Bone Crier's Dawn by Catherine Purdy. Super duper excited about this. And The Bone Spindle by Leslie Vedder. I don't know anything about this one other than it's young adult, and there's 2 strong looking females on the front, so I'm excited about that. I hope it's queer, although I'm not quite sure it is, so that'll be disappointing if it's not. And then this one is the second book to the Bone Crier's Moon series. I really enjoyed that first book. I thought it was really fun, and this is the special Owlcrate edition. I have the first one in Owlcrate, and I was really sad that I was not going to get the second one because I missed it. But luckily, a friend of mine didn't want this, so I was able to get the special Owlcrate edition from them, and I am super happy and ready to join these ladies on their adventure once again. Next is a haul that I did through a friend who works for Barnes & Noble, and I am super excited because these are books, some of them I've read and some of them I haven't, and this is when I was naughty because I got these after I started this reading challenge. I got The Tea Dragon Festival, which I have read. This is a graphic novel by Kay O'Neill. Really love this series. It's wholesome, it's cute, it's casually queer, there's disability representation, it's fantasy, there are anthropomorphic characters. It's excellent. Like Becky Chambers, but in graphic novel form. Wholesome, it's like a hug, absolutely love these. So I had to get the second one in paperback, and when the third one comes out in paperback, I will eventually get that one too, because again, I've already read it. Next, I've already read this book as well, which is These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. Really enjoyed this. Very similar to Violet Made of Thorns in aesthetic and genre. There's obviously a kind of tense romance and very dark fantasy setting. This reminds me a lot of Sarah J Maas, but better in my opinion. I found this way more compelling and less problematic, and I found this main character to be a lot stronger than a lot of Sarah J Maas's characters. I really enjoyed this. This threw me for a loop at the end. I was kind of meh about it all the way until the last few chapters, so I loved it and had to get a copy for my shelves, and I will get the second book when it comes out in paperback. Next is a book I have not read, which is Rise Up from the Embers. This is by Sarah Rosh and Kristen Simmons. I read the first book, Set Fire to the Gods, earlier this year, or was it late last year? Whatever. I read it. I really enjoyed it. I'm in my young adult era right now for some reason, so very excited about this. I can't wait to read it. It's a sequel. Next, I got The Drowned Woods by Emily Lloyd Jones. I read The Bone Houses a few years back and absolutely adored it. This is the author's newest release. I have no idea what it's about, and I don't really care. It looks great. That's all I know, is that it looks cool and it's by an author that I enjoyed previously. The next two books are from that same library sale that I got, Night of the Soul Stealer. This is Ink Heart by Cornelia Funk. I read this as a kid. I've already read this, so it doesn't hurt my TBR number, but I wanted to get it to reread it and eventually put it on the shelf for my child. So I don't remember much about it. I was very young when I read this, probably like 8 or 9. Going to reread this at some point and give it another shot and see if it's worth keeping for my child. It was a library sale, so it was very cheap. The next one, I have no idea what this is about. It's another children's book. This is The Doldrums by Nicholas Gannon. I don't know anything about it. I saw it at the library sale, it looked good, and I saw that it was a series, and it was pretty well rated, and there are pictures throughout, which I thought was super cool. So I'm gonna read this eventually. The last book for this haul. Book 1 in the Dragonwall series, Talon the Black by Melissa Mitchell. I know Melissa. We are friends on Instagram and Goodreads. She is lovely. She's a lovely human being. So when I saw that these books were getting signed onto a contract with Wattpad, I was really sad to see that the physical editions would go, because I don't think right now I'm in a time when I can read a book on Wattpad. I needed a physical book, and I wanted to read her book series, so when she told me she had the first book left in paperback, I got it from her. I'm super excited to read this. It's something about a dragon falling out of the sky, and a girl heals it, like brings it back to health, and it rewards her by taking her to a fantasy kingdom. And I've heard there's like romance in it, so I'm super excited. She chonky. Let's go. I'm ready, Melissa. I'm ready. That is my book haul, my book unhaul, and every book that I read in September. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more of my reading shenanigans and failures at reading goals. Thank you so much. Stay kind, siblings.